All right, now the test is sort of at the end over there, so we'll work through those and it was a test I had written for 140,000 professional technicians, so you guys should really enjoy that.
So, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, how do we mark it? You just color in the letter?
All right, you see these old cars out there that people want fixed. Now that 2011 model y'all are putting the motor in was set in the grass for a while before they had it done, you know. What got me was he was sitting in the grass, and when he brought it up here, it'd been sitting in the grass for 6, 8 months, maybe a year, and he asked me how quick would we have it done? And I said, don't even go there, man, you know, because you know don't start with me. Well, anyway, you got to be careful. Back at the when I worked at the Ford dealership, this guy brought this raggedy old early '80s Ford pickup in there, and this thing was in such bad shape that it was almost rusted out, where the back was flopping, and when you mashed the clutch, the dash would move. I mean, it was just wore out. This was a junky piece of trash. And so what they did was, the guy told them to go ahead and spend the $1,200 on the fixing the engine. And so he thought he was pretty slick. What he was going to do was, he was going to just not come and pick it up, and whenever it was auctioned off for the bill, he was going to go buy the truck for $200 or $300, and he didn't go, you know, because they auctioned it off. It's like a mechanic lien they had on it. And so whenever the general manager realized what was going to happen after that truck. See, they should have took money up front on one, or told him they weren't going to work on anything that old. So he sent somebody from the dealership over. He says, bid on that truck and make sure that he doesn't get it for less than what the bill is. You know, so that basically the dealership bought the truck and we used it for all the junk we what it amounted to. But sometimes people throw you under the bus. I mean, they'll let you, you know, spend all this money, you know, to get a bunch of money sunk into one if you're not really careful. And then whenever you're done with the job, they don't have money to pay you, and you're stuck with the bill and trying to collect it and all that kind of thing. And then that's a big pain. So you got to be careful on an old vehicle how much you put into it, and you got to make sure that they have the money to pay the bill. Some of them do. One time I was working on a Renault 18i, which is a car you probably have never seen and will never see, and at the dealership over there. And we had just got the AMC Jeep franchise back in the 80s, and I was checking it out, and it was a vehicle that had come from the dealer that we had bought out when we bought the franchise. And he wanted to know what it take to get it going. Well, the engine controller was under the seat, and it had been wet, and you could smell it was burnt. You know, and so I said I need an engine controller, and it was $1,800 for that engine controller. And this car was worth $100 sitting beside the road. You know what I mean? It's like when you buy a Renault, you're thinking, you know, my dad used to say when he worked on Renaults back in the early 60s, he said, whenever you first drive one of these cars, you think, man, this is just what I need, and a year later it's falling apart. But anyway, so what I did was I gave them a price of $1,800, and they said, go ahead and do it. And I put that thing on there, got it started, running, and they paid the bill and drove out of there. It was a junky piece of trash car, but they were willing to spend $1,800 to get it going again. You know, I don't really get that, but here we go. Well, this friend called to tell me of his nephew's '92 Cavalier had gone belly up at a local credit union. You know, a car like that one right there. I don't moonlight. You know, I don't even work on my own car. You know, if I need some work done on my car, I'll let y'all do it. You know, unless it's something that breaks down at the house, you know, whatever. But one way or another, this is the guy the other guy goes to lunch with me every day. This was his nephew's car, and the guy was living with him at the time. And so I went over to look it over, and this was a picture I took under the hood of the car. That is a bird nest. He'd been driving that car, but it had a bird nest under there. All right, so had fuel but no spark. And the number one spark plug wire was burned out. And the creation, it makes a nasty voltage spike. It goes back into the primary circuit. When you pull a plug wire off, that voltage is going to be looking for somewhere to go. And you can destroy some delicate electronic components by doing that. Be careful about that. Just about always, on the older cars particularly, it was really bad for the ignition module to have a spark plug wire disconnected whenever you were running it. No. One way or another, we got the Cavalier on lift, got rid of the bird nest, replaced the spark plug, burned out the ignition cable, the dead ignition module, and that's the kind of ignition module it had. Now, this particular one was a different style. That particular one had this built in. The module and the crank sensor were built in. It went in the back of the block there, and the coils, you know, the coil packs were down here. And we put those in there, and we got it going. And it cost about $400 by the time we bought everything that it needed. We got it going again. That same car, we had to pull a transaxle out of it and put a flywheel in it because some relative had put a starter on it. And the starter had one of the thickest shims on them Chevy. You know them Chevy starters got shims? Had one of the thickest shims I'd ever seen on it. And the old boy that changed the starter felt like, well, since it had this thick shim on it before, it needs it again, so he put it on there, and it destroyed the flywheel. So we had to, on this same car, we had to put the flywheel on. I'm smelling something electronic in here. That thing's not wired up still, is it? Okay. You know, like something hot burning? Anyway, here came this Sierra. This was she had an 87 Cutlass Sierra she'd driven since it was a brand new car. It looked a lot like this one here. And it was a rolling entropy. It was coming apart at the seams. And she had stalled in town. So she goes to this shop over there. And she's an old blue, white haired lady. And she goes over and she says, my car's not running right. Can y'all help me? And so they just threw a fuel filter on it. I mean, this is an old car. They weren't interested in working on it. So they threw the fuel filter on it. She drove away with it running just as bad as it was. And whenever she got across town, she noticed a bad fuel leak right under there where they had put the fuel filter on. They charged her for hauling it back to their shop with a wrecker, and then they charged her for fixing the fuel leak that they made.
Oh no.
You know what I'm saying? People get treated like that all the time. And you know, I'm not even gonna mention the name of the shop, but one way or another, that is a shop I don't put any of my people to work at.
Can they do that?
Huh?
Like, is that legal?
No, it ain't legal. I mean, she could have taken a small claims court, but you know what I'm saying, they knew she wasn't gonna do it. But long and the short of it is, there's a guy that both she and I knew, because I went to church with her when I was a little kid growing up. He said, can y'all look at her car? And so we got the car over here. She said it ran rough, had a bad vibration, and would sometimes stall while driving, so it run terrible. And it was when your teeth would shatter, because it had a big bubble on one of the tires. You could just shake your teeth out. I don't even know if you can stand and drive it or anything. And we popped a couple of tires on it for her, you know, got two tires, all she really needed, and we put those on there and got that cleared up. I didn't ever have it stalled, but it was, you know, a lot of other stuff that needed doing to it. You know, you see one that's been neglected so long, if a car is kept up the right way, you typically won't have a lot of trouble with it. And I don't really care who made it. You know, I mean, of course, I tend to like domestic makes better than I do the other one. But, you know, if it's a Toyota, if it's a Nissan, if it's any of those, you know, if you treat them right, if you do what the manufacturer says about changing your fluids and all, you typically are not going to have a lot of trouble with it. And that's just a sort of if you do this, you can generally, it's a principle, you know. And like when mine calls for coolant replacement, I replace the coolant. Like I look at the thing, if it says 60,000 miles, replace the coolant, I replace the coolant at 60,000 miles. You don't see rusty coolant system on my vehicles. But if you just keep driving it, you know, I have had people say, well, I say, when's the last time you had your oil change? They say, well, it still runs good. I didn't think I needed an oil change yet. Really? I mean, I've literally heard people say that, okay? All right, so a visual inspection revealed good fuel pressure, 2 burned out plug wires, it was like this, and a set of used up plugs like we'd seen on the Cavalier. And this was equipped with that antiquated Magnavox distributorless ignition system. And that's right after distributorless ignition came out on cars in the mid 80s on these Buicks. But you see that rusty crud that's in there and that rust right there. Do you remember, did any of y'all remember me telling you what causes it to be rusty when the plug burns out like that? When a plug wire burns out, if you pull a plug wire off and you see that it's all rusty like that, that is a bad plug wire. Now what happens in there, this boot, you not notice, and it snaps down on that coil down there, or on the plug or whatever. It's got a sealed area where no moisture can get in and no gas can get out. Okay, so when you've got a naked spark, you're making ozone, O3. All right, so the ozone, you know, since it's O3, is really corrosive. Basically, it causes rust, and sometimes it won't be red rusty like this, it'll be a black dusty look. But every time that spark jumps in there, because that wire is burned out in the end, it's causing ozone. It traps that ozone in there and it starts to attack everything ferrous in there. So if you pull a plug wire off, nobody ever taught me this whenever I was, but you know, you can figure it out. Every time there's a naked spark, there's ozone. That ignition system, when it's popping over there, I was talking to some dual enrollment students the other day about that darn thing. And when it was going poppity, poppity, pop, 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 and I was standing there breathing that ozone, I started getting kind of woozy, you know. It's like you're getting oxygen drunk, you know. But anyway, got a rough idle. With the plugs and the wires on there, the engine's still idle rough, and the intake manifold was kind of hot to touch, like the EGR was flowing. You know, remember I told you if somebody cranks one up and right away the manifold gets hot and it's running really rough, you can actually suspect EGR flow, and you need to look into that, you know, depends on what the vehicle, if it's one that's got a pipe right here that's going up in EGR, if you can measure the temperature of that pipe with a temperature gun or with your phone, with your FLIR, you know, camera like I got on it, if that pipe's getting hot, you know there's EGR flowing. There wasn't any vacuum being delivered to it, and we removed the valve and checked it physically, it wasn't leaking. So what do we do now? All right, so we broke out the scope. With the scope tracing the cam and crank sensors, Bert found no cam signal at all, even though we had good voltage and signal return in the sensor connector. See, it's supposed to look like this, and it looked like that. And you can see the wires looked absolutely horrible down there. The thing was just all messed up and coming apart. So I had to put we fixed that, we replaced the pigtail, and we replaced the cam sensor connector, and we got us a signal, and that smoothed that baby out. Now the cam signal is typically what it used in those days to determine when to put the next fuel injector squirt. Because if the engine, whenever the engine, the combustion chamber, when it fires, the fire typically has gone out in the combustion chamber by about 25 degrees after it's out dead center. Yeah.
Let me have one, I need you for 30 seconds.
What you need?
Chancey's broke down over the elbow on the light blue Crown Vic.
Wow.
I'm going to get her and carry her on the scoop, because her class starts in 15 minutes, and it'll be sitting by the road. You want the key left in it, or what you want to do?
If you're coming back by it, bring the key.
Okay, I'll do that.
And we'll go over there. What happened? You just quit?
Yeah, she said it quit, and it started up one time and quit again, and
That sounds like a fuel pump problem.
it does.
Yeah, okay.
But
All right.
I'll bring the key to you.
All right, do that.
Okay.
I'll see you after lunch. All right. Okay. Anyway, we found out that we replaced all of that. We got it smooth. But again, like I started to say before David came in here, the cam sensor tells the engine controller when the fire has gone out, so it'll know when it's okay to shoot the next fuel charge in there. Okay? Because it's putting it right behind the intake valve anyway. But obviously, they don't want a chance that, you know, you're spraying fuel in there and it could boom, you know, and something wrong. Well, a good running car, what we believe will be our final test drive, we made a U-turn and it started bucking and jumping. All right, and so we made it back to the shop. It would come and go. It would run bad, and then it would run good, then it would run bad, then it would run good. And so what we did, we got a timing light. Put a timing light with a long, you know, lead going there, hooked it up to the battery, hooked it up to one of the plug wires, brought it in there, put it under the car where you see it flashing on the carpet. And every time it would cut up, that flash would be crazy. And I'd say, that's a bad ignition module. You know, because the spark was coming and going. Because every time that timing light flashes, we see sparks in the wire. And so we got that. So bad wires and plugs can cause collateral damage. And remember that. If somebody lets their spark plugs wear completely out on one that's got spark plug wires on it, if it burns out to where they wore completely out, then that spark is going to be hunting somewhere else to go, and a lot of times it goes places that it shouldn't go. Really nasty. Not a good plan. All right, time for a practice ASE test. You ready for that? You ready for a practice ASE test?
Going with it.
All right. Huh? All right. Engine sludge can bring about oil starvation that leads to bearing failure and can be caused by, when I say oil starvation, I mean sludge in the pan, gets in the oil screen, starves it for oil, and you don't get lubrication and it destroys the bearings and stuff. Seen that again and again. A, frequent short drives that don't allow the engine to reach operating temperature. B, a bad thermostat. C, a poorly operating PCV system. Or D, all of the above. Don't say it out loud. Just mark your test, okay? EGR system failure can cause A, higher cylinder combustion temperatures. B, pinging and detonation. C, higher NOx emissions. Or D, any of the above.
What's EGR?
Exhaust gas recirculation.
Okay. You got in German it's called AGR.
Yeah. Oh, the Germans call it AGR?
Yeah.
One of those four. Technicians have been led by diagnostic trouble codes to investigate fuel trim numbers that are as follows. Short fuel trim, 0%. Long fuel trim, 27%. A, the fuel filter may be restricted. B, the crankcase oil may be contaminated with fuel. That's an extra B there I didn't need. C, the fuel pressure may be low. Or D, any of the above. Now your fuel trim is subtracting fuel. And the long fuel trim, when this one here gets as far as it can go, and there's no progress being made toward getting it to straighten up, the long fuel trim is a course adjustment that starts clicking fuel in there. So it is basically subtracting 27% of the fuel mix to try to correct oxygen sensor. So the fuel filter can be restricted, the crankcase oil might be contaminated with fuel, the fuel pressure may be low, any of the above. Now, I actually touched on a situation like this, vaguely like this, in a previous, I think the last PowerPoint that we did in here. All right. Time to move on. If an engine is knocking because of rod bearing failure, it could be due to A, rust clogged injectors, B, plug BGR passages, C, a broken relief valve spring or stuck relief valve on the oil pump, or D, any of these. Technician A says an engine oil pump is a positive displacement pump. Technician B says all engine oil pumps turn at half crankshaft speed. Who's correct? Now, a positive displacement pump is a pump that, when that pump moves, something's gonna go somewhere. You know what I mean? And a water pump is not a positive displacement pump. Because even if you cap it off, I mean, if you got water going in there, a water pump's just got an impeller, like a windshield washer pump. You know what I mean? Basically an engine oil pump's got gears, or a gerotor or something like that. And so it is a positive displacement pump. I'm gonna give you that. But what about this other one? Do all engine oil pumps turn at half crankshaft speed? Technician A says a bad radiator cap can cause rust and corrosion buildup in a car's cooling system. Technician B says the large pipe on a heater core is generally the heater core's inlet pipe. Is this correct about that? Now see, this was written for professional mechanics, right? Anybody that does the work every day will be able to answer these off the top of their head. No question, no problem. Technician A says all cooling systems call for a 50-50 mix of coolant and distilled water. Is that what you use over there? 50-50?
Yeah,
Okay.
because they got minus temperatures.
Technician B says water pump driven by the back surface of the serpentine belt and a water pump driven by the engine timing belt generally spin in opposite directions. If it's driven by the back of the belt, like that smooth pulley, like on the one you're working on, the one you're putting the engine in. Think about that. Like some of the Jeeps, when I have one that was driven by a serpentine belt, and on some of the others have driven by a V-belt, and then both of them would fit, but you put the wrong one on there, it's spinning the wrong way, and it'll go right in there, Technician A says injector firing frequency is directly tied to crankshaft sensor input. Technician B says on an engine with a crankshaft sensor and a distributor, improper distributor rotor alignment can be corrected by adjusting the ignition timing. Really? Who's correct about that? Is this test beating y'all up?
Yeah.
A technician is investigating a no-start condition on a vehicle with the following PID values. IAT 101, barometric pressure 28 inches of mercury, TPS 0.8, ECT 45, transmission oil temperature 47 degrees, battery volts 12.5. What's the most likely reason for the no start? This is the kind of question you would see in the L1 that gives you that patch right there. You gotta have all 8 of the other ones before you can take the L1, right? They also have got questions about running compression tests, and we're gonna get into that too, but not today. faulty baro sensor, a weak throttle position sensor, an open IAT sensor circuit, or none of the above. He needs to check more pins. The $42 inside door handle on a 2005 Nissan Sentra is being replaced for a quoted labor price of $350. This is the true story. Although she rejected this right here and said that she wasn't gonna let him do it. Technician E says the labor price is appropriate because of the skill level required to do the job. Technician B says parts and service providers should set their prices based on whatever they know the customer is willing to pay. Who is correct about that? All right, now we're gonna go backwards through these. We're gonna talk about them. You know good and doggone well, you know. You know, neither one of those guys are right. On this one here, let me hit you with this. It won't take but a second. When you see transmission oil temperature and engine coolant temperature sensor really close together, and this one here way off in left field, this one right here is gonna be the one that you're gonna be concerned about. I'll tell you, every engine controller has got 2 rooms in it. And they talk on different wires. They got an OBD2 room, that's just a plain old generic OBD, and then they got the enhanced room. The enhanced room will lie to you and tell you the intake air temperature is 101 degrees because it's going to pick a value that it thinks will work. The trouble is, when either down here and that one's up there like that, it's going to pump a lot of fuel in there and foul the plug when you're trying to start it on a motor vehicle. But if you go into your OBD2, this will be reading 40 below. Because the OBD2 will always tell you the truth about what's going on. If it's reading 40 below, that means it's unplugged, it's open, the wire's cut, something like that. So just watch for that. All right?
So that was what? C?
Yeah, that was basically going to be C. All right, so technician A says firing frequency is directly tied to crankshaft sensor input. He is correct. Faster the crankshaft's moving, if more of the signal, click, 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 it goes faster. Now the pulse width changes with load and stuff. Technician B says an engine with a crankshaft sensor is a distributor. You can't set the timing on one with a crankshaft sensor. That's the one that's bolted into the bell housing, reading off the fly. Unless you move the crank sensor. You know, there was an altitude modification on some of the Jeeps where you'd put a crank sensor in there that would be a little bit, you know, skewed for give you 8 degrees additional ignition timing, because when you do altitude modifications, you got to have more ignition timing because there's not enough oxygen, take longer to burn it. Anyway, so this guy right here is correct. This guy right here is not. Figure that out. Oh, I went the wrong way. Doggone it. All right. All coolant systems are not 50-50 mix. Occasionally you'll stumble across some of these exotic cars that want a 70-30 mix. Here's a question, here's a little thing. When it says all, that is going to be a not true. All, always, never, you know, this kind of thing. Typically, technician B says water pump driven by the back of the serpentine belt. You know, the timing belt's going to turn the same direction the engine turns, right? Unless the back of the timing belt's driving the water pump. But if the back of the serpentine belt's driving it, it's going the opposite direction and the engine's turning.
So neither.
That's right. Well, actually, this is actually not neither. This is going to be a technician B. Sorry. Technician A says a bad radiator cap can cause rust and corrosion. Go. It can. If it's just letting air come and go, it'll rust up in there like you won't believe. The large pipe on the heater core is the outlet. If you put the wrong hoses on there wrong and you're putting pressure in the big hose and then it come out the little hose, or some of the heater cores have got a restrictor in them, you always want the one going in to be the one that's got the restrictor in it, or is the small hose. The one coming out's got to go back to the engine. If you hook them up wrong, it'll blow the heater core. Remember when you put put your thumb over the end of the water hose, how the hose gets tight, the heater core get tight too. If it's got a restriction like that. All right, question 5. An engine oil pump is a positive displacement pump. That is true, although it does have to have a relief valve in order to get you some pressure. Technician B says all engine oil pumps turn at half crankshaft speed. That's not true, because some of them are driven by the crankshaft. Some of them are driven by the camshaft, by way of the distributor or whatever. If an engine's knocking, that's going to be this here. If the relief valve is stuck open, you won't have any oil pressure. If the relief valve is stuck closed, it'll blow the oil filter off very long. But if a broken relief valve spring or a stuck relief valve, make you have a little oil pressure.
Did you skip number 5?
If I didn't, I should have. That's all I got to say. No. No.
Okay.
Technician A is the right one on that. This guy right here has been led by DTC to investigate fuel trim numbers and subtracting fuel. Which of these can cause it to run too rich? Too much fuel, not enough air. Will the fuel filter being restricted cause that? No, it will not. That'll make it go drive the fuel trim the other way. Fuel pressure may be low, that'll drive the fuel trim the other way. The crankcase oil may be contaminated with fuel. Because it's pulling it in through the PCV system, you see. E3R
Number
system
2
filter.
is B.
Huh? Let me make sure I'm telling you the truth. All right, that's gonna be B. And this one right here is gonna be D, because it'll cause all of these. Higher NOx, hanging detonation, higher cylinder combustion temperature. Now, it won't happen on every vehicle, but it can, you know? All right, engine sludge can brought about, so this one right here would be any of the above. Poorly operating PCV system can cause sludge. A bad thermostat with running too cold all the time can cause sludge. Frequent short drives that don't allow the engine to reach operating temperature. People used to claim that Quaker State motor oil would sludge an engine up, but that's hogwash, because there's nothing wrong with Quaker State motor oil. What's wrong with it is people's driving habits. You know what I mean? You may even hear some of your old timers say, don't use Quaker State motor oil because it'll sludge up your motor. That ain't nothing to that. Quaker State motor oil is good as any other oil. But anyway, there you go. That's it.
What's number 4?